I want to start this review by talking about the progression system and loot crates. Actually, that's not true. I'm sure you're as burnt out as I am on the topic, but you can't talk about Battlefront 2 without discussing the huge impact that loot crates have on the multiplayer. This impact is so significant that it might be a deal breaker for some, so it's definitely worth outlining this component of the game first. If you're not down with Battlefront 2's loot crates and progression system, then there's little point talking about what the rest of the game has to offer. And this is a real shame because Battlefront 2 is a massive improvement on the original game in just about every other area. So before I talk about what I love about Battlefront 2, let's briefly talk loot crates. I also think it's worth mentioning that this system at launch, while not being great, isn't necessarily the end of the world. I've still been able to enjoy Battlefront 2 and do well in the multiplayer without having unlocked much. Whether this is still true a few months down the line is another story though. Not all items come from loot crates, thankfully. Weapons, for example, unlock based on the number of kills you have for each class. You still have to rank up in order to unlock additional card slots too, of which there are 3. Star cards are easily the most important part of the progression system because they are how you upgrade your character and vehicle abilities. Not all cards are super powerful, but the ones that are have a huge impact on your performance and ultimately how matches are won. Star cards predominantly come from loot crates, and what you don't get in crates can be crafted in parts, which again come from crates. You also earn parts from achieving certain milestones, but the amount is so low that it's hardly worth mentioning. The cost to craft level 1 cards isn't particularly high, but each new level is twice as expensive as the last. You also have to craft them in sequence, making it quite costly to craft the higher levels. In order to rank up classes, ships, heroes, vehicles and characters, you need a certain number of cards in that specific unit's deck. The number of cards you have for that unit is essentially the rank. Once you reach a certain rank, you'll open up new card slots. It's a strangely convoluted system. It encourages you to obtain and try out new cards and abilities, which is a good idea, but a lot of the time you're forced to craft additional cards that you don't want and can't use due to a lack of slots, simply so that you can rank up. Credits occasionally come from loot crates too, although the bulk is earned through gameplay. Both credits and crystals can be used to buy more crates or new heroes. Crystals will eventually become purchasable with real money, but at launch it seems you can only earn a very small amount through milestones. And when I say small amount, I mean absolutely tiny. Crates cost between 2,200 and 4,000 credits, or between 110 and 200 crystals depending on the type of crate. Heroes cost significantly more, with the most expensive being 15,000 for heroes such as Vader. In my first 5 hours with the game, I had earned enough credits to purchase a few of the Starfighter crates, which are the mid-tier, and still have about 10,000 left over. I had also earned enough parts to craft a few cards. It's worth mentioning that this doesn't include what I earned in milestones, which for reasons known only to DICE don't automatically add to your totals. You have to navigate to a separate menu to manually accept milestone rewards, because menus are awesome. There are 215 milestones across the entire game, providing incentive for you to explore everything the game has to offer. It's a decent number to complete, although it does start to taper off the more you play, so the further you get, the slower the grind. The biggest issue is that many of the higher level star cards have a big impact on performance, with significant advantages such as a 40% increase in the amount of damage you deal to a 20% increase in health. Even early on, it's obvious that the type of cards you have will have an impact on your performance and how well you fare against other players. It's hard to gauge how this will affect the game long term, particularly because we don't know how the progression system will evolve, but at launch it's unnecessarily confusing and it doesn't feel balanced. While the impact that star cards have on the game long term is yet to be seen, it's hard not to be concerned with how slowly you unlock things. According to calculations done by a number of players, it will take roughly 4,500 hours of regular gameplay to unlock all 324 cards. To put that in perspective, that's just over 2 years of game time if you played for 24 hours a day. I don't think this takes into consideration milestones, but even if it did, the number would still be huge. This grind is extremely punishing, particularly for casuals, and it's obvious that removing the season pass has simply been a bait and switch to a system that is not only unfair, but far more expensive. So bearing all that in mind, the real question is this system bad enough to stop you from buying the game? For me personally, as a fan of the 2015 game, it's not been enough to turn me off. I don't like it, but as I've mentioned, I've still been able to have a lot of fun with the game. So let's talk about the rest of Battlefront 2, because it's not all bad. Put simply, it's a beautiful, huge, and mostly satisfying game. The level of detail and the effort that DICE has put into both the flashy visuals and the depth of content is obvious, and it's also clear that they've tried to address many of the criticisms of the first game. Surprisingly, there are less modes on offer than the original. Personally, I don't mind as I typically stick to the same 2 or 3 favourites, but I can see how this could be an issue for some. Another oddity is the style of the menus. Given the overwhelmingly negative response to the progression system and many people labelling EA as evil, it's kind of ironic that the UI is themed in the dark side styling. It makes you wonder if this was on purpose or just a goofy coincidence. Battlefront 2's campaign has an interesting premise. It tells the story of the events that followed directly after the destruction of the second Death Star from the Imperial perspective. It's a period not extensively explored, at least not in the films, and it provides a different point of view of the conflict from a side we rarely get to see. The cutscenes do an adequate job of moving the story along, but it's the dialogue between characters during gameplay that's the most interesting. These conversations often reveal a human side to the generally stoic villains. It's also cool to be able to play through stages based on the films, such as the Imperial facilities on Endor. The campaign has received mixed reviews, but I personally found it enjoyable both from a gameplay and storytelling point of view, and this is coming from someone who rarely has the attention span to play through story modes. I can't say if the story will be of much interest if you aren't a fan of the films though. There's plenty of references to characters and events which might fly over the heads of less invested fans. Multiplayer is still the main event, and it doesn't disappoint for the most part. There are 5 modes: Galactic Assault, Starfighter Assault, Heroes vs Villains, Strike, and Blast. The new battle point system, used across all 5, is definitely one of the best additions and provides a lot of fun options for all level of players. It's true that you need to earn quite a few points to use the heroes, but even the cheaper alternatives can be both entertaining and devastating. Galactic Assault is the big mode this time, with 40-player lobbies, heroes, and a mix of infantry and vehicular combat. As expected, this mode doesn't disappoint from a pure spectacle point of view, but it also offers some interesting gameplay. Objectives vary across all the available maps, and each offer a good range of close quarters and large-scale combat. Whether you prefer playing as one of the 4 infantry classes, wreaking havoc as a hero, or going on a rampage in one of the many vehicles, there's something here for everybody. The sheer number of units that are available to players in this mode means that no 2 matches ever feel the same. If you get bored playing as one type, you can simply try something else, giving each scenario a new feel. Heroes vs Villains is pretty self-explanatory. 4 heroes on each side duke it out with the goal of defeating the most heroes. It's a good way to practice with all the heroes, but it's easily one of the least interesting modes because it gets repetitive quickly. Strike is a small objective-based game mode with objectives such as activating explosives and delivering packages. This mode lacks the larger vehicles, ships and heroes, but it does have more powerful units such as the Wookiee and Death Trooper. On the surface it doesn't seem that interesting, but matches are often fast and intense. It's a good way to practice for Galactic Assault too, as it's essentially just a smaller version of that mode. Blast returns from the previous game and it's still a typical team deathmatch. Personally, I like this straightforward, no-frills style of mode, but it certainly won't be for everybody. Starfighter Assault is the new take on Fighter Squadron, although to put it in the same category would be a massive disservice to the mode. It's an improvement in every way over the original. For starters, it has proper space battles and objectives, and as a result is far more epic. The maps are diverse and grandiose and play a central role in combat, as objectives are integrated within the environment. Starfighter Assault's controls are also a huge improvement over the original. The clunky auto-aim is gone and you can now manually roll your ship. This gives you greater control and the overall feeling of piloting is much improved. There's 3 main classes of ships: Fighter, Interceptor and Bomber. They all feel unique and have abilities that match the roles they play. On top of this, there are more powerful ships such as the hero ships to earn using battle points. There can be as many as 5 of these active at any time per team, and they provide a good incentive to play the objective, as doing so earns you a decent amount of points. Ship abilities differ between Star Wars eras as well, making it feel like there's much more than 3 classes. The hero ships stand out even more, with many having abilities not found in any other class. They do a good job of adding variety and depth to this mode, and they keep matches from feeling repetitive.
That's it. Stop as many bombers as you can.
It might sound as if, aside from the progression system, that the rest of the game is flawless. While it's true that compared to the 2015 game it's a far superior product, but it's certainly not without its problems. There are a number of bugs and inconsistent multiplayer performance issues at launch. This isn't unheard of, but some of these issues can be very distracting. Some can even prevent you from playing entirely, but it's likely they'll be resolved before too long. Hopefully, anyway. The squad system is another area that doesn't work so well, or really at all. The game will automatically group players and highlight squad members in-game. It even offers a bonus for playing together, but without any way to select your squad or spawn in on teammates, the current state of this system leaves a lot to be desired. In a game that's so obviously designed for team play, it's strange that this seemingly simple feature is so bare bones. Add to this DICE's usual poorly implemented party system, and playing with friends is frustrating at best. Some of the map design isn't great either. They all look spectacular of course, but some of the maps in Galactic Assault just end up being meat grinders with impossible choke points. Certain Starfighter Assault maps are also frustrating to play on. Some of them are littered with loads of debris and are extremely difficult to navigate. This results in a lot of accidental deaths and are definitely not as fun to play on. There's no character customization at launch outside of the hero characters either, although DICE has said this is coming. Custom games is another missing feature. It's not clear if this is planned at some point or not, but with the game being set up as a service, it's possible that these features, along with many others, will be added in time. That's one of the biggest problems with Battlefront 2 though. All DICE have said is that all future content will be free. What that content looks like and when we can expect to see it has not been communicated, and once again the consumer is expected to hand over their money for magic beans.
Another down, making headway.
Battlefront 2 has two obvious objectives that it has failed to reconcile. It has tried to vastly improve on the original game's shortcomings while also adopting a games as a service model to make it more profitable long term. The core gameplay, amount of content and the presentation knock it out of the park in regards to the first objective, and when focusing on these it's hard not to have a good time with the game. The problem is the way in which DICE has tried to achieve the second objective. The progression system is poorly designed and it's so pervasive it's impossible to ignore. If DICE can figure out a way to overhaul this system and add new content in a way that doesn't punish those who don't have deep pockets or years to sink into the grind, then things should improve substantially. With Disney cracking the Star Wars whip, then there's every chance that this will happen. Until then, it's hard to recommend Battlefront 2 to anyone except die-hard fans of the 2015 game. And even then, consider yourself warned.
Another shield generator has fallen. Only one generator remains. If it fails, the path to the Star Destroyer will open.